Is How to Be Perfect a solid introduction to moral philosophy and ethics? Or is it shallow comedic writing? Or is it a bit of both? Let me tell you what I thought. Welcome to Books and Big Ideas, what I'm reading, what I'm thinking about, with Joel Wentz. All right, I just finished How to Be Perfect, the correct answer to every moral question by Michael Schur, who is a successful TV writer, most notably the creator of the show The Good Place. And first of all, I never really judge the aesthetics of books on these videos, but I love this cover. I think this cover is brilliant. Makes me laugh every time I look at it. But let me take you through my typical format of a book review, which is the main idea, the research, the readability, and the reasonableness. So the main idea of How to Be Perfect, it's essentially his collected writing project after the experience of going through putting together the show The Good Place. So it kind of draws, there's light memoir elements, very light memoir elements of his own journey of discovering this kind of moral world of ethics and moral philosophy. But it really is more his attempt to introduce the ideas in moral philosophy that he got exposed to as he wrote the show The Good Place. And so basically what he does is he takes three of the most prominent, at least in Western philosophical thinking, three of the most prominent and ancient, well, except for consequentialism, but three prominent areas of moral philosophy, and he introduces them, and then he applies them to different moral questions. So those three areas are Aristotle's area of virtue ethics, and then Kant's area of deontology and things like the categorical imperative, those two, and then Jeremy Bentham, consequentialism and utilitarianism. Those are the three. So again, virtue ethics, deontology, and consequentialism. He takes those three. He dabbles into lots of other ones as he explores those ideas, but he essentially keeps returning to those three areas. He poses a moral question and then puts it through the filter of each of those three to see how each of them helps one sort out the question that is on the table. And then as the book goes, it gets to kind of more and more thorny and difficult moral questions by the end of the book. So that's essentially how to Be Perfect is structured and kind of the progression of it. The research behind it, it's I'm going to say more about this in the readability, but it's actually primarily, I would say, comedy writing. It's not primarily academic or ideas writing. It's secondarily that, I would say. And so the research, it's not like a rigorously footnoted book. There are some direct quotations, but more often than not, the quotations are indirect, or he just poses summaries of things, and he doesn't always necessarily connect it directly to the source or whatever book from, Aristotle or Nietzsche or whatever that he read. So the research is not super, usually when I talk about the research, I talk about how easy it is to find where the writer got their sources. This is a little bit of a complicated one, this one, because it's not super easy to find where he gets these quotations and stuff. But that being said, from my own reading and my own understanding of some of the questions he attacks, he does a solid job at summarizing it, and it is clear, to me at least, it's clear to me that he did spend a lot of time reading these sources and researching them and trying to synthesize them in his own mind and developing a way to make sense of them to kind of the normal person, which was essentially what The Good Place was a vehicle for his writing to deliver it to people who were into that show. So the research is solid implicitly. It's clear that it's there. It's not explicitly easy to chase down or so obvious, if that makes sense. So that's the research behind it. It is. He did his homework, you can tell. But that gets me into my second thing, which is the readability. So the readability from a purely accessibility standpoint, the readability is off the charts. I mean, this is a really, actually, very fun book to read. And I said a minute ago, I'm going to repeat it, what I said a minute ago. I would say this is actually primarily a comedy book. I think it's primarily that, and secondarily an intro to philosophical ideas. So if you want primarily an intro to philosophical ideas, I don't think this is going to fill that void for you. But if you want a genuinely enjoyable, readable, and really, there were parts I was literally, and this never happens to me, but I was laughing out loud by myself reading this book at a few points. There were really funny parts of it, and the footnotes are really funny, actually. That's he uses the footnotes as a way to smuggle in some humor. So from a readability, enjoyability perspective, it's really great. I quite enjoyed the experience of, and just the comedy. If you like The Good Place, he also worked on shows like Parks and Rec and The Office. If you like that style of humor, you know what you're getting into here. It's super enjoyable from that perspective. Very easy to read. And then finally, the reasonableness of it. I've kind of hinted at this a little bit already, but I do think he did a solid job at introducing these ideas, particularly his work with Kant's ideas about deontology. I think he does, of the three main branches he surveys, I think he does the best job at introducing that one because that's probably the most difficult to understand. I think he does a really commendable job at making that an accessible idea, making that make sense to people who haven't been introduced to any of these kinds of ancient philosophies. So it's good from that perspective. I think he does a fair job at introducing those big ancient concepts, moral quandaries. He does a really good, like any good kind of comedic writer, comedy can be an excellent way to introduce difficult ideas, and so he does that really well. There's a whole section where he talks about whether or not you should, return your cart to the cart return stall in the parking lot as a moral question, and he breaks it down through those three areas that I just referenced, and it's really funny, but it actually is a really solid way to think more deeply about deeper ethical quandaries. So from that perspective, I think he does a really good job, particularly if you've never read, and now if you've read anything either by Kant or like academic kind of work in, interrogating Kant, you're not gonna get anything new here. So do not come to this book expecting, like I said, that deep academic philosophical reflection. But if you or someone you know would be interested in that but doesn't have the time or energy or wherewithal to even start somewhere, How to Be Perfect is probably a really good place for them to start. Now, I do want to say, on the reasonable category, 97% of the book, he does a really good job at balance, but he is a Hollywood elite, and with all the kind of progressive bona fides that come with that, culturally speaking, there's a few times where that seeps through, particularly when he comments on philosophical work from like Ayn Rand, or when he comments on the COVID pandemic. It's just a couple times, but it is there. It rankled me a little bit, mostly because he does do a really good job for the majority of the book at not, not getting preachy or condescending or contemptuous. He really does a good job for most of it, but it does eke through a couple times with some of the stuff that he comments on. So just know that that's there for what that's worth. Again, I don't want to overstate that because it's a very, very minuscule portion of the book, but it's there. It could affect some readers. So, How to Be Perfect by Michael Schur, at the end of the day, it's really funny, genuinely funny. I'm even thinking about parts that made me laugh right now as I'm talking about it. Genuinely funny, super readable, not going to give you a major new idea or introduction if you're already conversant with moral philosophy, but it'd be hard for me to find a better introductory level, super readable, super accessible text that actually does a good job at summarizing some complex ideas. So there you go, Michael Schur's book, How to Be Perfect, the correct answer to every moral question. Hope that was a helpful breakdown for you. If you know of other books that are in this vein that you'd recommend, go ahead and post it below. Thanks as always for watching.